We hope that it's
both entertaining and informative. We think we've struck a balance. The programs are immensely entertaining, I feel. The music itself is just very powerful and very, very compelling music. But there is also interpretation and commentary. And, of course, we tried as much as possible to let the performers speak for themselves. There's a lot of material from interviews with these various performers and Black Gospel personalities.
John Landis, producer of This Little Light of Mine, a radio series on Black gospel music, ranging from the very earliest spirituals to the modern gospel music. John Landis, now of Nashville, previously produced some radio documentaries in Kentucky about folklore and folk music. Here on Tennessee Kaleidoscope, he talks about his Black Gospel series, which has been funded by the Tennessee Humanities Council. Many of the persons featured in the series have Nashville connections.
Hoss Allen, the gospel music DJ at WLAC and rock and roll DJ of the 50s and 60s, is the subject of one of the programs.
Good morning, friends. This is the Horseman. This portion of Early Morning Gospel Time is brought to you by Reverend Sister Carol. Now listen to this great gospel tune.
He talks about the influence of WLAC on Black gospel, also on early rock and roll and rhythm and blues. And we have a program on the Fairfield Four. The Fairfield Four is a Nashville group. They sing in the quartet style, although there are 5 or 6 people in the group now. But back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, they were quite a well-known group nationally. The material on the program includes a number of early recordings. Some of these recordings are from the Library of Congress, and others were commercial recordings made some years ago.
The Fairfield Four, one of the musical groups in This Little Light of Mine. And most of the programs in the radio series are narrated by Bobby Jones, the host of television gospel shows.
Hello, this is Bobby Jones, welcoming you to This Little Light of Mine, the story of Black gospel. This week, we'll learn about Reverend C.J. Johnson.
Bobby is featured in the program on Black Gospel and the Media, where we talk about some of the ways in which Black Gospel, originally a grassroots folk style, we talk about some of the ways in which it's been shaped and influenced by the mass media. And in that program, we talked to Fred Mendelssohn, who is a prominent record producer, who produced a number of the greatest Black Gospel recordings for Savoy Records.
I could see at these recording sessions, especially the live sessions, when I saw the effect that it had on the audience, which was dear to me because it was how they reacted, which told me what was happening with the session itself. And I could see that the spiritual feeling that they had when I saw the people crying at some of the selections. I could commiserate with that. I couldn't get the kind of feeling that would make me get up and do a happy dance, for example. Sometimes the audience was moved to do, but I could understand them doing it.
Record producers, preachers, musicians, composers, and singers like James Cleveland and Shirley Caesar are all a part of This Little Light of Mine. More of them will be featured in another Tennessee Kaleidoscope show, and producer John Landis has hopes that the series will eventually be heard on many radio stations across the country.
People like Shirley Caesar and James Cleveland are very powerful performers. It's just marvelous performers and personalities. And they are extremely well known in the black community, but they are not very well known in mainstream American culture, and they ought to be. So I hope that one outcome of this series will be to make these names a little bit more well-known in the mainstream culture.
This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the WPLN Educational Foundation. This is Lynn Folk.
Sweet Honey in the Rock is made up of some relatively young people. The music that they sing spans the whole range of performance styles, from the most traditional sorts of lined out black hymns to more modern forms such as reggae.
Sweet Honey in the Rock is a contemporary singing group featured in one of the programs in the 13-part radio series, This Little Light of Mine, the story of black gospel, funded by the Tennessee Humanities Council. But many of the artists in the series represent earlier times, like the street corner guitar evangelists, most of them gone now, but their music has been preserved on record. And here today, some excerpts from that program. In putting the series together, producer John Landis was assisted by many authorities in the field of black gospel music.
William Dargan, who was an ethnomusicologist at Fisk, assembled the material for the program on Sweet Honey in the Rock. He conceived the series and wrote the grant and did a number of the interviews for some of the other programs. David Evans, ethnomusicologist at Memphis State University, pulled together the material, the interviews, and the songs for the program on the street evangelists. The songs of these street evangelists are very powerful, and the music that guys like Blind Willie Johnson and Reverend Gary Davis made back in the 1920s still influences rock and roll and modern gospel today.
Nobody on earth can take a mother's place, man.
In this following segment, Blind Willie Johnson's wife, Angeline, tells how they met on the streets.
He was singing on the street, and he was singing, "If I had my way, I would tear the building down." And I went walking behind him, "If I had my way, oh Lordy, Lordy, if I had my way, I would tear the building down." And I went on to, talking with him, and then I asked him, I says, "Say, are you married or single?" He says, "I'm single." And I said, "Come go to my house, I have a piano." And so he says, "All right." Well, we went on over to the house, and we sat down and taking a few drinks, and played. Then he played his guitar, and I got up to the piano, and I went to playing "If I Had My Way." He said, "Go on, gal." I said, "Tie it up." Well, we went on back, and so he says, "Well, let's get on the streets." And I said, "All right." So I said, "Well, look," I said, "don't you want something to eat?" He said, "What have you cooked?" I said, "Well, I have some crabs." I said, "We're making the old-time nigger gumbo." I said, "Don't you want some?"
Ranging from the guitar evangelist to Sweet Honey in the Rock, This Little Light of Mine, the story of black gospel, features many well-known performers, preachers, and composers. Assisting producer John Landis in putting all this material together, as mentioned earlier, William Dargan, David Evans, and
We had Tony Heilbutt, who is a professor at Hunter College in New York and the author of The Gospel Sound. We had Jeff Todd Titan, who's a professor at Tufts and a scholar in the field of black music and the author of an important book on the blues. And we had Horace Boyer, who was a curator at the Smithsonian in music and is now at Fisk and is the director of the Jubilee Singers. So that's the caliber of scholarly advice we had on this series. All these people added a lot to the series.
this program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the HCA Foundation, the philanthropic arm of Hospital Corporation of America. This is Lynn Folk.
I guess I have more of a perspective about women because I have an internal viewpoint on them. Of course, I admire and respect men in the same breath, but I don't understand them in the same way. And so my paintings of men are generally less deep. They're more surface-oriented, whereas my paintings of women, I believe, are my better work. They capture more of a side of us that goes a little bit beyond our surface image.
Chattanooga artist Eve Oldham specializes in her paintings of women, but she does other subjects too and has many other artistic interests. She's the owner of Notchwood Gallery, where some 30 artists and craftsmen display their work. She's a writer, a former advertising executive, illustrator, and designer. This is Lynn Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope with Eve at her home and studio on Lookout Mountain, and here's a portion of our conversation about her psychological approach to her portraits of women. These paintings are not intended to be literal portraits, but rather impressions of the nature of woman.
I have been working on paintings of women, actually psychological studies, and they seek the core that I find eternal in each of us. And I have been striving, I guess, for 20 years to connect us all to that thing that we each have in common with one another. But I have to do it through visual means. Other people do it with written words. Other people do it with music. For me, I believe that we seek images of how to be, and that women in the past 20 years have come through an age when we needed visions of ourselves, our better selves. And so that's what my work has been about.
Are these actual portraits of certain women?
Well, for the first 15 years, they were sort of mythological creatures. They were people that I dreamed of being. In the last 4 years, they have become specific women that I find to be touching, admirable, inspiring in some way. Women with very strong, potent senses of themselves. And the last year, the paintings have become portraiture in a sense, but I'm trying to go beyond simple portraiture or literal likenesses of people, and trying to touch that thing that I'm seeking, that so many women signify in our society, that others of us need to have as visions. I don't think you can become your better self unless you have a vision of what that is. And so that's what they're like now. They're specific women.
But you're not looking for professional women who succeeded in that. You're looking for something else too, aren't you?
Yes, although success in a person shows that they have a good sense of themselves. And what I'm really looking for is that sense of personality, that we can look at it and say, oh, that's who she is. Isn't that admirable? Isn't that something that I could strive toward? There's a lot involved in our culture. And I'm looking for those women who seem to have a sense of themselves inside that culture.
Are you still looking?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. This is an adventure. This will go on till I'm 90, 100, 190.
Are they all people that you really know? Or do you see someone and you think, oh, I must have that person painted?
Sometimes it's a visual suggestion, but most of the women I am either friends with or involved with in some way, and we have some sort of rapport that leads me to an understanding of their personality. Sometimes it can be a fairly brief friendship, but often it's someone that I have known and admired for a long, long time.
Do most of these women have in their possession these paintings that you have done of them?
Yes, many of these specific women, own their own paintings.
What is their reaction when they first see your interpretation of them?
Women have a difficult time knowing what they look like, and it's always exciting to me when one of them will say, oh, is that really me? Is that what I really am like? And invariably, they're not as sure as other people are that this is a painting of them. But I think that's because we, maybe as humans, have a difficult time being outside ourselves.
Chattanooga artist Eve Oldham. This program made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and Johnson & Higgins of Tennessee, insurance brokers and employee benefit consultants. For Tennessee Kaleidoscope, this is Lynn Folk.
And I don't ever put no varnish on nothing. I polish all my wood with a rock and a bone. elbow it. Put that elbow grease to it until you get it where a fly break his neck on it.
And when Thomas Alvin Jarrett has finished polishing a wood piece with a bone, it is so slick that a fly could break his neck on it. This is Lynn Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope at Jarrett's home outside of Rockvale, where I saw countless walking sticks, wooden toys, all sorts of kitchen gadgets, and primitive Afro-American carvings. Alvin Jarrett, whose grandparents were slaves, left Tennessee in 1921 to work in restaurants in the big cities, Louisville, St. Louis, Detroit, and Cincinnati, where he was a waiter in fancy restaurants, and often it was his job to be the meat carver. He says he's had a knife in his hand from the time he was 8 years old when he was given a knife, but told not to harm anything with it. Jarrett is now confined to his home, where for 20 years he's been carving wood. In the summertime, he sits on his front porch and carves, and frequently persons driving by will stop to visit, make some purchases, and listen to Jarrett explain how he creates these various objects.
I don't work with no pattern. I make nothing just alike. And after I pick up a piece of wood, I look at the wood and visualize what's in that wood or what I can get out of that piece of wood. And then I start to work on it just from scratch. I can't pattern behind no one. And I do not try to fix anything for other people to pattern behind me. And if they try, I can tell it, regardless how good they may feel it to be. I can tell. I always got my mark. I can feel my mark on in most any of my wood.
You say you look at the wood and then that tells you what to do. Is it the grain in the wood or
the
what?
Size of the wood and the imagination that you forms with that much wood or that piece of wood or that length or width or whatsoever it is. You form that within your mind it's just like drawing a picture. But I'm not a drawer much. I draw a little thing, a few things, but the things I draw are too big for me to use a knife.
Do you do everything with a knife?
Everything with a pocket knife. That is, knives that's done been thrown away. I don't use no new knives. The knives I use is what you might call old material. It's some of the old metal that was made years ago, and it's got more stickability in it than the metal that you've got now.
He uses old knives and old wood, and it's always cedar, old cedar that he's found when buildings have been torn down.
This here cedar was cut, I guess, long before the Civil War, because it came out of old homes that was built maybe you might say in the 18th century. And back there then, people didn't have to cut sablet, little bitty splinter wood to build. They had everything was plentiful, and you could pick any size of tree you wanted, from 1 foot to 6 foot through. There were cedars almost that large back there in those days. I know I've been around them. I've been around, honestly.
How long have you been around? Could I ask you that?
Yeah, well, sure. I'm 82.
So you do remember a lot of all of these things.
I had to learn. You had to learn. All of our family, you had to learn. Had to learn something. You were kept busy, and you wasn't going to just pick up this rock and hold it and stand and look at the birds. You're going to use the rock for something. Do something with it. Make steps with it. Flat rocks, make steps from here to Rockvale if necessary. You don't have to walk on the ground. You're walking on rock steps. We was brought up that way, you know. So I'm 100% for people that keep busy, because you're never old until you say you're old or feel that you're old, but still outsmart that by keeping busy.
Thomas Alvin Jarrett's carving was represented in the 1978 exhibit and book, The Afro-American Tradition in the Decorative Arts. This program, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the WPLN Educational Foundation. For Tennessee Kaleidoscope, this is Lynn Folk.
I'm pretty much a jazz player in terms of, I say jazz because I use improvisation in my music. In other words, we play a tune that Marlene writes, and then there's room for us to make our own statements. But in addition to that, I mean, I do a lot of other things. I do musicals. I'm involved in symphony projects and classical things and just about anything. But my main emphasis is trying to do my music with my records in a jazz context.
Tennessee Kaleidoscope with vibraphonist Jerry Tachoir and the music of Jerry Tachoir and friends. Music from their album of the same name. He's a jazz musician, known internationally, who's lived in Nashville for about 8 years, and his wife Marlene writes his music.
I'm from Quebec, it's about 2 hours northeast of Quebec City, and I met Jerry in Boston while I was going to college, the same place.
The two of you work together, and you play the piano, I know, and what else do you do?
Well, we have this quartet together, and we put out some records, and I write the music for it. I think that's why he married me, as a matter of fact.
Jerry Tachoir was first a musician with the Pittsburgh Symphony. Later, he and Marlene came to Nashville, where their first performing engagement was at the Radisson Hotel.
We came in as creative, improvisational artists that really weren't here with a tune and a guitar. And it's sort of like the doors opened wide open for us. And we immediately got the job at the Radisson Hotel. We were there for, about a year and a half. And it was the first time they ever had a jazz group that have a steady job in Nashville, Tennessee, which is obviously known for what? Country music. Everybody knows that in commercial. So it's sort of like we did what is non-traditional for musicians when they first come to Nashville.
Have you appeared in various places around the country?
Oh yeah, we travel everywhere. I mean, any place that'll have us, we're there. And we've done everything from, well, played Europe and all the European jazz festivals. In addition to that, I'm a clinician for the Ludwig Drum Company, actually the mallet side, which is the Musser Vibrophone Company. And I do a lot of clinics for them. I go into universities and colleges, and for a few hours I'll have an improvisation seminar, and I'll meet with the children and the kids and explain to them exactly what we're doing and what to expect, and then we'll do a concert that evening. So we're pretty busy. My wife is writing a book and got the new record that just came out, so it's busy.
Name some of the festivals where you've been in Europe.
Oh, the Montreux Festival in Switzerland. We've done the North Sea, the Pori in Finland, Montreal. We've done that festival. And we've done a lot of club dates. We've done the Pittsburgh Three Rivers Jazz Festival, and just about most of the major ones. We've pretty much been there in one form or another, either as a duo or with the quartet. Music is my life. I've known that since I was 7 years old when I first got involved in music, that's where I wanted to go and that's what I wanted to do. But I tell you, nowadays I see so many kids that are involved in music, and really what they're thinking of is, well, I got to get me this instrument, I got to get this instrument, I got to get a synthesizer and a big amp, and they don't really know that there's more to it than the equipment you own. You have to practice, and you really have to learn the basics. Like, so many people are forgetting acoustic piano. They're getting involved in, like, here's electronics, and right away they have a computer and a DX7 by Yamaha, and they're out there playing those two instruments. But when they say, hey, play a tune on the piano, they're sort of lost. There's a real void now in music. And I think until that gets resolved, there's going to be a lot of inadequate people playing on instruments nowadays.
Tachoir plays all the percussion instruments, but mainly the vibraphone.
It's a Musser vibraphone. I also play marimbas. The vibraphone is not that old. It only came out, I believe, in the 1939, 1940 era. But it is not like a normal traditional instrument that you see every day. A lot of people look at it and say, oh, a xylophone, you know. It is of the xylophone family, but the thing is, it's bigger. It has a dampening bar, and it has aluminum bars that when you hit them, they'll keep ringing.
More from Jerry and Marlene Tachoir in the next Tennessee Kaleidoscope program, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the WPLN Educational Foundation. This is Lynn Folk.
There are so many things positive about music in general that you have to experience it to really understand it. And what I suggest to musicians in general is to try to be open-minded, try to give everything a chance before you say, nah, I don't like jazz or I don't like country or whatever. Really listen to it and make sure you understand what's going on before you condemn it. And basically I say the same thing to the listener too, that so many people say, well, I wouldn't go to a jazz club because I don't like jazz music. Well, jazz is such a broad term nowadays. It encompasses everything from rock and roll to Dixieland to swing to avant-garde. I mean, it's such a broad term that how can you say you don't like jazz?
In a previous Tennessee Kaleidoscope program, the music of Jarrett and Marlene Tachoir. Today, more of their music and their comments on jazz, especially their kind of jazz.
We did a park concert, and it was real interesting because we did the entire thing of like original music. It was our quartet up there playing things that we wanted to play and that we feel best at playing. So after the concert, we had a guy come up to us and he says, you know, I really enjoyed what you do, but why didn't you play like standards? People like to hear standards. And, you know, my comment to that is like in small clubs we play standards and we play things a little bit more to the people, but in a concert where people actually come to hear a specific artist for that specific reason, I like to give them the best of what we can do, and the best of what we could do is where our heart is truly at, and that's like in our own original music.
We'll play somewhere and some people will come to us and say, what kind of music is this? And we'll say, well, it's jazz. And people say, but we don't like jazz. We like what you do, though. Do you know what I mean? So we get that a lot.
Jarrett Tachoir and his wife Marlene came to Nashville a few years ago. He plays the vibraphone, marimba, and other percussion instruments. She writes the music, plays piano, and sings occasionally. They've performed internationally and locally. This conversation was at one of the Nashville clubs where they appeared. They've recorded several albums, and the music heard here is from one of their latest albums, Jarrett Tachoir and Friends.
Jazz is not all that scary. If you do not understand that, what you can do is just feel the vibes, and because there's an amount of energy in our music that people can relate to, you know, and so we just hope the audience in Nashville is going to grow, and we'll just keep on doing it.
I guess there aren't too many husband and wife teams playing together, aren't there?
There are a few. There's Cleo Lane and Harold Dankworth, a duo. Well, they play together all the time, and there's a few other, but we are a rare breed, and I was real lucky to find this woman because she's such a talented composer, and we went to school together at Berkeley in Boston, and I really fell in love with the way she's able to sit down at the piano and come up with original compositions as a drop of a hat. Like, I can't do that. When I sit there, it takes me hours of going over two bars and over and over and over and over, and she just sits down and like writes pieces. She's written most of the tunes on all three of our albums, so, you know, I'm real proud of her. And as a matter of fact, I should mention that actually two of her tunes won some awards. There's a tune on our Canvas record called Infraction that won the first prize in a 9th International Jazz Composition Contest in Monaco. And then the next year she entered another tune, it's also on that record, called A Child's Game, and it's won 3rd prize at the same contest. And this is people from all over the world that are submitting compositions. So obviously this girl has some talent. I'm real proud of her.
Jerry and Marlene Tachoir. This program, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the HCA Foundation, the philanthropic arm of Hospital Corporation of America. For Tennessee Kaleidoscope, this is Lynn Folk.
It's called A Cast of Tennessee Faces, The Powerful Language of the Face. It's a project that the Tennessee State Museum commissioned me to do, and the project honors notable Tennesseans who have made an impact on life in 20th century. But it deals with the concept of how we see ourselves.
A committee helped artist Maggie Sherman choose the 25 subjects for her show, A Cast of Tennessee Faces. After that, she was on her own, contacting these celebrities, arranging for times when she could meet with them and make plaster casts of their faces, and then getting them started in decorating their own masks to their liking, some expressing what they are, and others indicated what they would like to be, by using personal objects from their own lives, memorabilia from their careers, and colors that had the most meaning to them. This is Lynn Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope with Maggie Sherman as she described the mask-making procedure.
After they accepted our offer to let us honor them, we made a plaster gauze cast of their face. Plaster gauze is the same material doctors set broken limbs with. They, in turn, took the cast and decorated it to make a mask of themselves. And then we collaborated, artist to artist, to decorate a small pine box so that it created this totally personalized environment of the individual that expressed what they feel that they are about and where they came from. The invited participants had excelled in areas of sports, music, politics, business, literature, and to the extent that they had excelled, I felt that they were artists. However, the mediums that they used were not visual arts as I use.
Have you had people compare these to death masks?
Yes, because if they're left white, they look exactly like death masks, and that's why I asked people to take it a next step further and decorate it. Now, when they decorate it, what they're doing is expressing something about themselves. The interesting part of this casting, masking process, the casting part is passive. You lay there, somebody casts your face. The masking part of it, which is where you take the cast and decorate it to make a mask of yourself, is the active part of it. I feel that we express something about who we are and how we see every day by how we present ourselves, how we carry ourselves, how we move, the body adornment, and in other words, the fashions and styles that we choose to wear, the expression that we have on our face, if people know that we're in a good mood or a bad mood, or if we're in a phony mood or whatever. And this is what I call the powerful yet unspoken language of the face. And I think that's why people like to people watch. So I guess I've taken people watching to an active level.
I guess the idea of the person decorating makes up for this, but you have no expression in this mask that's made, or do you?
Yeah, you can. If you can hold a smile for 5 minutes, you can, or if you can hold yourself in a screaming position. I did a woman and she wanted me to cast her face in 5 different positions one time. It was really intriguing.
Do you find that some people are very conservative? Like, I would think maybe the politicians might be more conservative. Is that so?
Wrong. Writers. The people that deal with the written word were the most conservative group I have ever dealt with. They edit it right down. The politicians actually, once they got going, they were really intrigued with it and were very open to taking a different approach.
Maggie Sherman spent a year working on her Cast of Tennessee show. She's a native of Nashville, but she now lives in Vermont. And in 1981, she did masks of almost everyone in the town of Montgomery, where she lives.
I used the casting, masking process to catch the essence and spirit of an entire town in New England. I see this project here in Nashville as the next step. It expounds on the past project. It takes it further, and it's more dimensional.
This unusual display of artwork, a cast of Tennessee faces, 25 Tennessee faces that are well known worldwide, was first seen at the Tennessee State Museum, and there are plans for the show to tour the state later on. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the HCA Foundation, the philanthropic arm of Hospital Corporation of America. This is Lynn Folk.